on the radio. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. This is the FBI. We've got a warrant for your arrest. Put him up. 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 Put him up higher. Put him up higher. Put him up higher, sir. Put him up higher. Put him up. Do you see anything on the side? Put him up higher. I don't see anything. Put him up higher. Back up.
FBI, freeze! Get your hands up! Get your hands up! Get your hands up!
Who the hell are you?
Get your hands up!
FBI!
Come on, get your hands up! Show me some identification!
Lay on the ground!
Get your hands up!
What the hell's going on?
Who the hell are you?
Sanders! There's people behind you! Lay down! Lay down! Lay down! Right now! Right now!
Lay down! Just take it easy! Just take it easy!
Do it!
Okay, I'm down, I'm down. What do you want me to do?
On your hands. Flat down. Flat. Right there. Keep your hands out.
Don't move. Don't make any moves. Don't move. Watch out. Come right Mark.
FBI, you're under arrest for armed robbery. Please do not make a move. Stay where you are. Turn around. Turn around. Stop. Smooth ring. Put both hands behind your back. Palms facing out. Anything like hypodermic needles. Certainly appreciate if you were calling about that. Anything more weapon-wise? How about if we go and take it over there?
Nothing in my mouth.
Okay, we'd appreciate it. Cooperate. Check for any handcuff key taped to the back of it.
Command post, Echo 1.
Let's ask PSation if we want somebody else to go ahead and take the job before.
Get in there.
Lock him up.
What the hell's the deal, Johnson? Huh?
What?
You scumbag.
Way life is, man. Life is tough.
Somebody.
There's always people in our societies that want to conduct illegal activities. The organized crime, as we define it within the FBI, meets the requirements of the Sicilian Mafia as it started over 300 years ago in Sicily, plus the Chinese triads that started over 300 years ago in China, and the Japanese Boryokudan or Yakuza that started 300 years ago in Japan. I believe there's individuals like that in our society that want to conduct illegal activity rather than strive to be a regular citizen. Then through historic background, these people are brought together for ethnic reasons and common interests, and they've been able to perpetuate what we call a continuing criminal conspiracy, where they're involved on a day-to-day basis in illegal acts. And I think there's just a certain type of personality that likes to be involved in organized crime activities that know no other type life that they would rather do. And that fosters the organized crime groups throughout the world.
Organized crime in the United States is very complicated. I mean, there are 30, 40 different groups, some very large, some smaller. Essentially, any group that involves itself in multifaceted types of crime like extortion and labor racketeering and drugs and crimes of violence for profit, and has a corporate, quasi-corporate structure is what I would define as organized crime. The La Cosa Nostra or the Mafia has become the stereotypical example of it. But we have numerous other types of organized crime groups in the United States. And nowadays, some of them are becoming more powerful, more violent, and even wealthier than the old La Cosa Nostra Mafia organization. To some extent, the outlaw to the American mind means the independent person, the person who is operating outside the system. Remember that some of our political tradition comes out of a revolution. So Americans like to think of themselves as being independent. And then in America, we've always had this fascination with guns, which is unfortunate. We have too many guns in America. So the romanticizing of the Mafia is almost part of a pattern that we go through in romanticizing the outlaw in the United States. That's an old American tradition that goes back to the Weston novels and Billy the Kid and Bonnie and Clyde, and you can get too deep into American psychology, and who knows what that is. I mean, it's a mix of many different people looking at things in somewhat different ways.
Bonnie and Clyde were boldly keeping a rendezvous with some of their henchmen near Grapevine, Texas. 2 state patrol officers sighted the pair and decided to investigate. Upon sight of the officers, the 2 outlaws demonstrate their talent. Cold-blooded murder. For every peace officer in the entire Southwest became so enraged after the news of this killing. The heroic effort on the part of the dedicated law enforcement finally paid off one day on a dirt road deep in the state of Louisiana. Any one of these bullets would have been enough to kill both gangsters. No one is invincible in the eyes of the law.
Bonnie's burial was attended only by close friends and relatives, numbering about 150, including her sister Billy Mace, who was a prisoner of the law, charged with the killing of 2 state highway patrolmen, for which crime her sister Bonnie had been accused. Billy Mace was attended at the funeral by 2 deputy sheriffs and a matron of the jail. Clyde Barrow's mother and father, seen in the background, and his brother also paid their respects to the girl who was Clyde's only friend and who died by his side. In the last few words of Bonnie's own poem, which she penned just prior to her death. To a few it means grief, to the law it's relief, but it's death to Bonnie and Clyde.
No punishment can be too severe for these public enemies. They deserve the whipping post or worse.
The infamous gangster, Charles Arthur Pretty Boy Floyd, was not romanticized by the press like his contemporaries. Instead, he was portrayed as a cold-hearted, ruthless criminal who in reality did not commit many of the crimes attributed to him. Born and raised in Oklahoma, Floyd worked on his family's dirt farm, struggling for years through drought and hardship until the area became part of the Great Dust Bowl. Almost destitute, Floyd knew where there was money. He obtained a pistol and drove to St. Louis, where he committed a quick payroll robbery. On June 17, 1933, 5 men were machine-gunned to death in the Kansas City train station by 3 gunmen. Floyd and his new partner, Anna Ricchetti, were identified as the killers. To his dying day, Floyd insisted he had not been in on the Kansas City massacre. Time ran out on Pretty Boy Floyd on October 22nd, 1934. Trying to escape a local dragnet, FBI bullets cut him down. FBI agent Melvin Purvis asked him as he lay dying, "Are you Pretty Boy Floyd?" "I am Charles Arthur Floyd," he said, and he died.
Help the federal drive to put the gunman and the racketeer behind the bars where they belong.
John Dillinger was America's classic bank robber. Born in Indianapolis in 1903 to a typical Midwestern family, his mother died when he was 4 years old. After a stint in the Navy, Dillinger was unjustly sent to jail for a grocery store holdup. An ambitious but bitter young man, he quickly escaped. His gang would soon carry out the most successful bank robberies in the country's history. Within the space of 12 months, Dillinger robbed more banks and stole more money than any other gangster had in their entire careers. Famous and greatly admired gangster managed to escape again by carving a phony pistol out of soap. Now, Dillinger had an army of law enforcement agents after him. Finally cornered in the alley behind a movie theater, Dillinger was reportedly shot in the back by agents of the FBI. No hard evidence was presented that the man shot was actually John Dillinger, and many witnesses commented that the corpse had brown eyes compared to the gangster's blue eyes. Only a handful of men, including a young J. Edgar Hoover, knew the truth. Regardless, Dillinger left his mark on history.
Who writes the history and who interprets the history, that's all that matters. So the history of the Mafia, which is yet to be written in any sense of being objective about the larger view, they are seen even now as rather urban cowboys, which is what they are in a sense. They are urban-centered, and they are brigante. I mean, they're like going back to there was a certain heroic halo over the heads of the brigante in the period when the Bourbons were so despised in the Garibaldi period and the period before and after. But they came here to the United States and they took advantage of what was to be dealt with. What was to be dealt with? Well, in the beginning you had the Italian ghettos in New Orleans, in Philadelphia, in New York, in Chicago, you name it, Providence, Rhode Island. These were industrial towns which had infusing into their labor forces laboring Italians who could not speak the language, but under padrones were able to find opportunities to subsist and to survive, as the first generation must always survive, being serfs. So you had those who were serfs under the old medieval system of Southern Italy, under the what was left of that old regime, coming to the United States and still remaining serfs.
Well, around 1890, you had now the second wave of what we call Italian. Right now it would be official to call them Italian because Italy became a country around 1870. We did have Italians here in 1850. This was the largest Italian population in the United States. But they were from Genoa, Rome, and at that time they didn't call themselves Italian. They were Sicilian. It was after the Civil War that the Italians were brought here and worked for about $1 a day. That $1 a day in some places was listed like this: $2 for white people, $1.50 for black people, and $1 for Dagos. If they call you Dago, it's no good. Even to this day, it's no good. I know when you call me a Dago, you're not my friend.
Every immigrant population. We are a nation of immigrants. You remember John Kennedy, our president, wrote a book when he was a younger man called A Nation of Immigrants. He was thinking of the Irish perhaps, but our Italian Americans are one of the most glorious parts of our population. I mean, they are really wonderful, and they contribute throughout our lives in fabulous ways. But every immigrant population has brought with it problems of adjustment.
Nobody leaves home if they're happy. You would never have immigration from Italy or anywhere if they were happy in Calabria or happy in Apulia or happy in Sicily or happy in Naples or wherever. They all leave miserable people. The people who leave home leave with anger and tears. And they are coming out of desperation to someplace else. It is difficult to leave home. You're not going to be met at the boat as it lands at the docks of Manhattan or Philadelphia with a bunch of people waving the flags and putting flowers around your neck. So leaving home is difficult. Desperation is what drives certain people who are willing to take chances. Now, a lot of people can be desperate and they just can't stand the possibility of sinking in the sea. So why take a chance? But those who took the chances were the angrier, the more driven, the more frustrated, and the better criminals.
One thing he brought over with him among his hard work ethic and family is suspicion. So the biggest suspicion he had was of authority. Well, that's why he left Italy.
Now, these are people who came from Sicily, mainly here in Louisiana, and they came because of economic necessity, not because of political prosecution or political reasons. And they came here not with the idea of remaining here, but they came here mainly to stay a while, find a job, make some money, and then eventually returning to their homes.
All Southern Italians are very insular, as I said before. The fear of strangers, the suspicion, the dialect, the fact that they lived in mountains remote from other mountains, so there never was much traveling in the south of Italy. But when you cross that sea and you survive, you have something behind you to say, well, I've gone pretty long from where I left and I'm still alive and I must have some momentum going here. So this is the land with a lot of momentum.
He thought after Garibaldi unified Italy that everybody was going to be living like kings and queens and princes. But that didn't happen, so he says, I'm going to America and find the gold in the streets or in the trees. But of course, all he found here was hard work.
He had to take what was given to him. So paying for attitude is what first the Mafia used as a realm of profit, as a means of exchange. So the Mafia became capitalists in this capitalist society by catering to the American desire for illegal goods. Now, the American desire for illegal goods, illegal commodities, be it drugs, be it liquor in an earlier period, being anything, is a very much an American attitude to Sicily's.
Well, organized crime is distinguished from ordinary crime primarily because it deals in goods or services that people want. They want to gamble. During Prohibition, when organized crime became a more serious problem in this country, they wanted alcoholic beverages, took criminal conduct to provide them, loans, and they'll pay any type of interest to get urgently needed cash.
The conflict that was in the city at that time dealt with the economic powers on the riverfront, and the chief of police was providing whatever support he could to the rival gangs. The Provenzano was one group, and the Matrangos was the other. And I don't mean gangs from a criminal sense, but gangs who worked the riverfront. They were unloading the various ships, and this rivalry was very, very intense.
The legend is that he was trying to be a peacemaker between the Provenzano and Matranga family. There was a lot of bad blood and a lot of problems. Now that's documented. That problem was there. Whether or not the chief of police, or the superintendent as his official title, was really the peacemaker, I have a serious question about. If I have him figured out right, he was trying to get the best deal for himself.
David Hennessy was appointed the first superintendent of New Orleans Police on March 13, 1889. Shortly thereafter, on October 15, 1889, he was shot down while leaving a town hall meeting. He was shot down right off of one of our most famous streets, Bourbon Street.
He told his friend, he says, "Good night, I'll see you." And his friend heard a shot, come back, ran back. By the time the chief was laying on the ground, he says, "I gave it to them."
Hennessy, as I said, was gunned down, and it was suspected that because of the way he was killed, he was fired upon with sawed-off shotguns, and he lived to tell the story. And throughout the New Orleans community, it spread that the Italians were responsible for his murder.
We really don't know who killed the chief of police. Till today, there's no knowledge. Hennessy was supposed to have known all of the criminal elements in the city by first name, and he was supposedly said that the Dagoes shot me.
No, he never said it. After he died, he closed his eyes. This friend of his said that he whispered in his ear that the Dagoes did it. But he waited till the chief died before he said that. Why didn't he say it before?
Now, it wasn't until over a year later that a committee was formed, and they actually began looking for the bandits who shot down Hennessy. Through that investigation, a grand jury indicted 10 people for murder and for the shooting of Hennessy, and 9 others for accessory. These people were brought to trial, and in one of the major trials held in New Orleans history, 6 of those defendants were found not guilty by a court. They were found not guilty, and 3 others the case was dismissed because of a mistrial.
That night, the committee of 50 decided that they would send out a notice to people to meet on the morning of the 14th by the clay statue on Canal Street, and they would discuss that when the law breaks down, they got to take justice in their own hands. So it was a vigilante group. They went there with guns, and they went there prepared to do damage. They had the list. They had the names. They knew who they were going to get. And they took 11 people, and they shot them. Even people that had never been to trial. People who had been to trial and been found innocent.
They stormed the old parish prison one day. In March 16th of 1890, they stormed the jail. They ran out and they shot 9 of the suspected suspects to death. Shot them to death in the jailhouse. They hung one man in the plaza and hung another to a lamppost outside. The people who did this fled back into the community and, up to my knowledge, were never arrested. But this had such repercussions. Diplomatic ties were broken between Italy and the United States, and it took a lot to settle things back down.
This uprising was not for the love of Hennessy, but against the Italians, anti-Italian. So what you saw was riots in the city at that time against the Italian community. I really don't think they cared about their chief of police that much. The myth is that there was a trial in which justice was subverted by the Mafia, and that the Mafia was able to bribe jurors to coming up with a mistrial where they could not make a decision and acquit, actually, some of them, find some of them not guilty. That is what has been passed on for 100 years, that these men were guilty and that justice was subverted by the illegal activities of this so-called gang of Italian criminals that controlled crime in New Orleans. That is not true.
I have never really used the word mafia. From my perspective of our country and the Italian people whom I love, it has connotations of prejudice. It has nothing to do with the Italian people or with Italy, but it always suggests as a single word that we have this terrible affliction in our country that's caused by a bunch of foreigners, all Italian, and that's not, that's not true.
Another Mafia episode that happened in Independence,
yes,
which is the second largest Italian community outside of the city of New Orleans for Louisiana. Basically what happened in May of 1921, 6 men of Italian descent, they planned to rob a bank in this other Italian community outside the city of New Orleans. And so some of them had contacts with that community, and they went up there to look the place over, and then in May they drove up there and tried to rob the bank. Well, they never did rob the bank. They got in an alleyway, and someone came out in the alleyway thinking that there was a chicken thief in the alleyway, and there was a shootout, and a man was killed. And a massive manhunt ensued after that, and these 6 Italians were eventually captured. They were then tried for first-degree murder, found guilty, and there was a second trial because they appealed their case and found that there was a technical error that was made. The second trial had the same result. All 6 men were convicted again and then scheduled to be executed. They said that these people came from Chicago and New York, particularly where the Mafia was very powerful, and they said that this was just a continuum of what happened with the Hennessy activities. The major, one of the major connections between the Hennessy episode and this trial of these, as it became known as the trial of the 6 Italians, was that these men were then scheduled to be executed in May of 1924, and the governor at that time refused to give them a pardon. There was a movement afoot to try to pardon them because they said this would be the only time in American history where 6 men would be executed for one murder. And they did not, a lot of people did not want that to happen. The governor refused to pardon them. The governor at that time was John M. Parker. John M. Parker was 30 years earlier, he was one of the 4 major leaders who led the mob to storm the prison over the Hennessy episode and lynch 11 other Italians. There was a strong prejudice at the time in the trial. The trial basically was controlled by the Ku Klux Klan at that time. The judge, the district attorney, the sheriff, and some of the jurors were all Klan members, which, as you know, the Ku Klux Klan was no lover of any immigrant, let alone Italians, Catholics, or anyone that was different than them.
In the Northeast, you had the Sacco and Vanzetti case, which was going on about the same time. I think that took place in 1920. Those men were executed, I think, 27. So, you know, there are parallels here, and I think it'd be obvious to make a connection, even though obviously is none, between this and what happened in Boston.
Other than the fact that people argue that the reason for executing Sacco and Vanzetti was their radicalism and anarchism connected with being Italian.
Help the persecuted and the victim because they are your better friends. With these words, Nicola Sacco finished a last letter to his son Dante, written just moments before he and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were executed in the electric chair at Massachusetts State Prison in August of 1927. The 2 Italian immigrants were laborers with anarchist sympathies when they were arrested 7 years earlier for a murder committed during a robbery in a Brockton, Massachusetts shoe factory. After having spent 7 long years in prison, perfecting their English while attempting in vain to prove their innocence, the 2 Italian anarchists were sentenced to die amid the widespread protests of the American public. Official response from the FBI and police to these protests were brutal beatings and group arrests of many individuals sympathetic to the defendants. Subsequent investigations into the trial transcripts have demonstrated that the only crime Mr. Sacco and Mr. Vanzetti were guilty of were being anarchists and being Italian. Serious political repercussions on account of these events are predicted for the near future.
The proof of the pudding is when Sacco got on the train with his partner, they were going home, they said, these are the 2 Italians that did it, and all they had to say was, this Italian is good morning. You say, hey, how you? He'd say yes to anything because he didn't know what they were talking about. And in the meantime, they got killed over this. Is this not true? Well, of course. Whether it happens to 2 or 2,000, it's the same thing. When you don't understand, you're not at the wrong time. How do they know? You know, they don't know if you're making fun of them or what. They're trying to be friendly, and you got them scared because they don't know what you're going to do to them. They had fear in Italy, in Europe. That's what they left there to come here for, to raise their kids.
I think it's a reflection of what I call demonization. Our country is very good at demonizing people. I mean, think of Noriega in Panama and how we make him subhuman, or Saddam Hussein in Iraq. and constant repetition. You take a person like Meyer Lansky, who's a very dangerous, violent, and unprincipled sort of person. He's glorified. I mean, in Israel they have what they call the Meyer Lansky law, and the Meyer Lansky law says that no Israeli will be extradited to the United States. We just don't do that. I mean, we take care of our own problems and our own people. So I think when you think of Bugsy Siegel and people like that, they're almost shown as comic character bit players in the organized crime picture.
I don't believe that anybody can control anything until first they control their crime, a group. Then they can go on and control their politics and their schools and things like that. But the Irish controlled crime, then went into politics. The Jews came here from Eastern Europe, they controlled their crime, although they like not to admit it now, and then they went into higher education. The Italians came here and they've controlled their crime, and now out of that they've started to control the politics. Different, out of the violence comes other people who never would be a part of violence, but who, they were never going to make it unless something was controlled first.
It's very important for the well-being of people who think they are moral to believe that the criminal is different from them. Any society wishes to believe that the crime is caused by other than their own predominant culture. Well, this is a culture in the United States that has a means of expressing itself through media. Italian representation in media is practically nil in the United States. Jewish representation in media is remarkably prevalent.
But it's not just the Jewish-American organized crime activity. The Chinese-American is a very interesting one, and it's overwhelmingly ignored. In 1900, there were more addicts to opium and its derivatives in the United States in 1900. And we didn't have 75 million people here. Than there were in 1965 when the country was terrified of crime and heroin was widely used.
The Westies that were a gang that specialized in doing murder and would do it on contract. And they were made up largely of Irish Americans and functioned on the west side of Manhattan. That's how they got the name Westies. And they do their own murders of their own people, and they'd have their own rackets and illegal activities. But one of the things they would do is contract murder for organized crime families. Sometimes rather than having somebody in the family do the hit, or even somebody else in the Mafia do it, you'd want to separate it from yourself. So they'd get paid on a contract basis to go out and do a hit. And they had become very proficient and very effective at it, unfortunately.
The Mafia really was not doing anything but following a kind of American tradition. American tradition. Of course, in following that American tradition, they're not going to be accepted for doing that. They're going to be rather ridiculed. The Mafia is ridiculed for being violent, as if we don't have an inherently violent culture. I mean, it's not exactly a land of social workers.
We love wealth. We absolutely love wealth. It's our immorality, it's our character flaw that makes us love this wealth. It's not, it's not limited to the romantic figures as they're portrayed in organized crime. Take a person like Michael Milken and junk bonds. I mean, when someone says junk bonds, you have to wonder if you really want them. You don't like junk, do you? But here's a man who made $600 million in a year. $600 million in a year as a junk bond expert. And we glorify him. I mean, take a Donald Trump. And until Donald Trump failed, people worshipped Donald Trump. But I don't think he had a moral bone in his body. I never saw it if he did.
But the reality was there. It was very, very strong. And the thing about the Mafia that does remain unique in America is it was the one group that was able to penetrate almost every aspect of our society, able to penetrate politics, business, labor unions. Other organized crime groups were not able to achieve that kind of broad penetration of American society.
We've always had a criminal underlayer in the United States going back to the first settlers. I'm not talking about Italians, I'm talking about what we now call Anglo-Saxons. This is a hard industrial society of might makes right, of drive, wide open spaces to be conquered, a belief in the future and optimism. Of course, robber barons were heroes. The robber barons were really the forebears of great American families. Harriman, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, are all gangsters. Carnegie, gangsters. I mean, we don't call them gangsters. They don't call themselves gangsters. You know, they're founding fathers, but founding fathers could be godfathers. You know, there's not a lot of difference. There is this pragmatism, there's this drive to achieve, there's this single-mindedness, and of course there's this killer mentality, or the criminal mentality that I say is inherent in the American settlement.
Police! Police! Take what? Police! Get your hands up, man! Get him up! Get him up! Watch it over the way! Get him up there! Ain't no way you! Get him on! Shut up! God damn it! Ton more crack. We got it, Bo.